I'm delighted to be joined right now by Robert Bates, who's Research Director at the Centre for Migration Control, who's joined us in the studio. Thank you so much. Let's talk about two stories in particular. One is about how much it costs to leave the country in the UK these days, because passport prices have just gone up, haven't they?
Yes, hitting about £100 now. I think this is probably...
Well, almost. I mean, in fact, almost. It's £94.50.
Yeah, well, so, you know, it's still a big amount for individuals that are perhaps, you know, already having their budgets tight, their household income squeezed by cost of living and, you know, the tax hikes that we're now seeing as well. So it's another burden placed on the shoulders of the British taxpayer.
Well, it is a huge cost, and especially for families, when you are, if someone's got like 2 kids, the cost of you getting test passports. Also, because of these EU rules, we have got this situation where if you do the EU rule, I'm so sorry, they've got a problem with the microphones there. If we've got the EU, you have to have more than 6 months on your passport before you can actually. You can actually travel. That's part of the problem, isn't it? So you're having to have a passport renewed much sooner. Yeah,
there's a whole host of problems with the current system, and of course the reason why they're focusing on these at the moment is because they are saying that they need to install a bit more order into the passport system and into, you know, the exits and entry points. But unfortunately, that doesn't seem to be the case at the moment. Britain, since about 2020, has been claiming it's been doing exit checks, but you know, it's been very superficial.
They have no idea who's in the country and no idea who's
and that's why we have 1.2 million people allegedly in the country illegally, and that we don't actually count people out.
It's always blown my mind that we have to faff around with this going through passport control and the questions and the like. Well, Benjamin Butterworth, you were saying that last time we went through, they knew who you were.
They did.
They
recognised me, and they said, "Do you know one of my favourite journalists, Julia Hartley-Brewer?"
Yes.
And that's a true story.
Hello, if you're listening.
Gatwick.
Hello, Gatwick Border Control. But this is the thing. It's the fact that they don't really keep a record. They don't really know what's going on, and we're being charged with privilege. But of course, there are a lot of people who get very worried about their passport disappearing, because for a while there were a lot of long delays, weren't there? And it would be like 6 weeks, months sometimes. Remember, MPs were getting a priority passport link at one point. I think we had the boss of the passport office working sort of 300-mile drive away from the passport office, which is a bit of a giveaway.
Yeah, there's a lot of chaos after
it's got a lot better now. But basically, if you want to do the fast track service, so you could just turn up to your local passport office, you get an appointment. It's £222. £222, and that's even just like with the same photo, all your same details, just fill out a new form, and they're charging you 222 quid. What are you paying for that?
Well, and it's hardly faff-free. I mean, a lot of people probably on the fast track will have experienced the kind of delays that come with that as well.
I remember, I paid for a certain number of days because we were going away, and again, it arrived sort of days after they said it was going to arrive, and I was absolutely panicking.
Yeah, by the time you've gone through that whole process, you really need that holiday, really. It's incredibly stressful.
Absolutely. Let's also talk about the people, though, who get to come here for free, who don't produce a passport because they conveniently leave it somewhere or throw it in the sea when they're on a migrant boat, and they of course come here for free, and then we pay for them, no doubt paying for their documentation. Oh, by the way, apparently we're all supposed to have ID cards now.
Yes, I think we're heading in that direction, aren't we?
That's what
Tony
40
Blair's
MPs
found the reason now to finally stop pushing his case, and one that probably will get quite a lot of people.
Just on that, because you've been very sensible on all this at the Centre for Migration Control, the idea that if we all had ID cards and digital ID cards, it would be great for us to access the NHS. I mean, no, you need to be able to get an appointment. They don't have a problem IDing us. They don't even ask whether you're here legally or allowed to use the health service. But the idea that this will stop employers from employing illegal workers. If you're employing those people without checking their passport and their status already, you're already doing it because you want to work on the black market and pay them under the legal minimum wage anyway. So how is that going to work?
Well, exactly, and it'll just gum up. It'll make the more processes more bureaucratic. Getting a GP appointment more hassle than it already is. It'll make everything more difficult for the average Brit rather than.
And what if you lose your card?
Well, exactly. Then you have to go through a similar process with the passport control, I'd imagine, as well.
Part of the fun.
There you go, back in the system.
Well, look, let's talk about those people who do come here illegally, because only 5 people in the last year have been convicted of piloting small boats across the English Channel, despite more than 6,000 migrants making the journey. So that's just since in the last few months. So we had at least 119 dinghies arrive from France in Britain in the past 3 months. We're getting more and more of them as the warm weather happens. We're getting more and more people on each of those boats because they've made it harder for the smugglers to get hold of those boats. But despite all those boats, and well, Rishi Sunak was stopping the boats. Keir Starmer is smashing the gangs. I mean, haven't seen much evidence of that so far. Despite all of that, they do actually need someone to actually operate the engine and to steer. Often those people, I think, they only go a certain part of the way and then they head back. But only 5 people have actually been prosecuted for that. I mean, that's absurd.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is absurd. It's a really small number, and we've never been incredibly good at actually prosecuting those individuals that have been facilitating this. There's been very few convictions in this area. I think there was about 60 last year as well. So it's hardly been something
in the whole year.
Yeah, exactly. And if you think about the number of people that would be prepared to be getting involved in this trade, the hundreds, if not thousands, of people that will be stepping up to the plate for every one person that is convicted, you realise really that they are trying to push water uphill by smashing the gangs. Because it's something that if you don't stem the flow of migrants coming across Europe, trying to cross the channel, then you will do absolutely nothing to deter those individuals.
Well, I mean, I'd always thought there'd be a lot of these, the people who paid to get on these boats. Someone's told, like, put the engine on, off you go. And then we'd seen reports that they just sort of hop off part of the way. They get them out into the water and say, right, hold this stick, keep the motor on, keep heading that way, and in about 5 miles. The British Navy is going to pick you up and you'll be fine. Yeah,
I think there is a case of some individuals occasionally either getting a bit of a sweetener to do it, some sort of asylum seekers getting the opportunity to maybe get a bit of a discount or being coerced into doing it as well. But a lot of the time it is individuals that are hooked in the gang network as well and, not really being caught as a result.
We did have that wonderful story earlier in the week about and it was just extraordinary. It was in the Sun newspaper about that gate that had been put up, that barrier. It's sort of like a barrier to a car park, 2 posts, a barrier that goes up and down that was supposed to stop people smugglers getting the boats onto the beach, carrying the vans of life jackets. Nice of them to give them life jackets these days, eh? But bizarrely, it's open all day, only closed at night. Oh, and also surrounded by open, flat, green fields. So all you'd need is like a vaguely 4x4 style car, and you could just simply drive around the fence. And of course, British taxpayers' money would have gone towards that because we give best part of £500 million to the French to help deal with this. And that apparently is, they've got 2 of these. That apparently is how they're going to do it.
Well, yeah, money well spent as always. And of course, the French have been incredibly unhelpful. We hear stories in the last couple of weeks of the French effectively telling asylum seekers on the dinghies, go out, go for about 10-15 minutes. The Brits will come along and pick you up as well. We need to get far tougher with the French. And we need to remember that actually there have been instances where British vessels have entered French waters to pick up vessels that have turned over and taken them back to French land as well. So it's not out of the ordinary or out of the no precedent that we shouldn't be able to if the French are playing silly gets, then we shouldn't be able to play silly gets.
Well, I mean, extraordinary is a report today that a British fisherman, Matt Coker, said he's heard radio transmission between British and French authorities about giving life jackets. There's the French giving them life jackets now because so many of them not getting in the boats with life jackets. They're trying to avoid another tragedy, but they give them life jackets and then they ask for the life jackets back off the British ones when they pick them up, and then a transfer is made. I mean, we're just facilitating. I don't want people to be dying on those boats, but they're just sort of making it easier for people, aren't they?
No, absolutely. And I think the important thing in the article that you just discussed is the fact that we are seeing more people put onto these boats as well, and that is because the demand has not abated at all. Yes, we might be making things slightly more difficult for the people smugglers, putting a bit of grit in the ointment, but we're not really doing anything to stem those flows. And that's why when the Labour Party came in and they decided to scrap all semblance of a deterrent, they really effectively bound themselves to a policy that is doomed to fail, because if you don't do anything that would persuade individuals looking to cross the channel that it's not worth their while and that they won't get asylum.
And here's why they think it is worth their while. They know they've got a very good chance of getting here, and once they're here, the odds are they're going to be allowed to stay. The latest absurd reason given why someone shouldn't be deported. A convicted cannabis dealer, Greek migrant Sally Dragody, who's 26, has been allowed to stay in the country after a judge ruled that his removal would breach his human rights, despite objections from the Home Office. Nice of the Home Office to object. The reason they objected is he said he'd only committed the crime because he ran out of money during the COVID pandemic. So that was okay.
Well, yeah, that's their interpretation of what OK is, and I think that's probably the interpretation, fortunately, of what a lot of immigration tribunal judges would deem is an OK.
So if you ran out of money, you're allowed to just go and commit a crime. That's fine, you can stay here.
Well, and it's hard to actually decipher what human right is being breached by returning this individual to Greece. Greece, as far as I'm concerned, isn't a war-torn country.
Again, another of the many countries we all try and get to ourselves.
Well, exactly. Well, if we can get a passport. But yeah, this isn't an individual that's fleeing a war-torn hellhole. He's not going to face persecution if he's returned. He's effectively come into the country. He's been able to be given semi-settled status under the EU settlement scheme, which was a system introduced by Theresa May, riddled with problems that we're now starting to see the effects on. And as a result of that kind of status that he was given, the judges have clearly said, well, in the balance of things, we're in favour of him staying in the country. So it's an extraordinary decision, but it's one in a long line of them at this point. I think people are starting to get headaches with sheer frustration.
It is absolutely laughable, isn't it, Robert? It really is. Benjamin Butterworth, listening to all of this, look, you're on the left, even you. even you must accept that the way the human rights legislation is being allowed to use to allow criminals to not be deported is now, you know, from Albanians and chicken nuggets and you name it, a paedophile whose children would lose out by not being with him. I mean, really, after he's a paedophile rapist? I don't think so. These are absurd cases. They make a mockery of this.
They do make a mockery of it, and they make a mockery of actual human rights, which clearly are important to protect. You know, and many of these, as you talked about Greece, many of these cases do not relate to horrific countries where maybe the consequence would be disproportionate. When you talk about Albania or Greece or Central Europe, these are nice countries where we go on holiday.
But even if someone's come from a very nasty country where you can understand they'd want to leave, well, here's the thing. If you come from somewhere really horrible and you're now living somewhere nice, maybe don't commit serious crimes and you won't be sent back there. I would have thought that would be a really big incentive for people, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I don't understand why the assumption is that they can stay unless there's some kind of extreme reason to send them back. It should be the reverse.
Robert, do you think that fundamentally we're going to have to leave the human rights legislation full stop? Otherwise, this madness is going to continue.
Yeah, I think you know, most of the British public have realised that for quite a while now.
I mean, even Hamas are trying to use the European Convention on Human Rights to stop themselves being sort of designated a terrorist organisation today because they claim it imposes on their rights of free speech. I mean, this is mad. It's
a plaything for the worst and most nefarious, and I think there's a part of the kind of intellectual lawyer worldview that quite enjoys the kind of
little game.
How far can we push it?
Well, it's all an Oxford Union debate for them, isn't it? As opposed to the real world of living and people having to live among people.
They're not there in the communities, having to see the uptick in crime.
Absolutely, absolute pleasure. Thank